Everyone, welcome to our members event, an exclusive members look at the making of our exhibition, Angela Davis Sees the Time. My name is Donna Gustafson. I'm the interim director for the Zimmerli Art Museum, located here in New Brunswick, New Jersey, on the campus of Rutgers University. Our presentation is being recorded, and it will be available on the Zimmerli's YouTube channel soon after the event. I want to thank Janine D'August, our membership coordinator, for inviting us here to talk about Angela Davis Sees the Time. Before we begin, I want to thank my fellow panelists, Gerry Beegan, who is the co-curator of the exhibition, and Lisbet Tellefsen, who is the archivist who made the whole project possible. I want to thank them for joining us here today and for their work over the last 4, maybe 5 years as we wrestled with how to create an exhibition centered on a rich archive of magazines, posters, booklets, flyers, records, legal documents, and court sketches that would somehow be an art exhibition, and struggled with how to organize an exhibition that seemed to be about a single individual, Angela Davis, but really was about so much more. It was a tough challenge, but I believe that we succeeded. Tonight's conversation will be about the process that led us to the book and the exhibition, which is on view here at the Zimmerli until June 15th of 2022. It will then travel to the Oakland Museum of California, and it will be on view there in Oakland from October 8th, 2022 through June 11th, 2023. So our conversation tonight will be in 3 parts. We'll begin by talking about the genesis of the project, and then we'll talk about the actualization of the exhibition. For this, we'll share some slides. We'll end our discussion by speaking about a couple of favorites that each of us has picked, and we plan to leave about 15 minutes for questions. So please save your questions for the end, and Janine has promised to jump back in to help us field those questions. And just so you know, questions can be sent using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So let me hand it over to Gerry Beegan, Professor of Design at Mason Gross School of the Arts. Gerry will start us off.
Hi, Donna, and thanks for that. Just to say that it's been an incredible pleasure working with the Zimmerli and working with Donna, especially over the genesis of this whole project. So I'm Gerry Beegan. I'm a professor in Mason Gross. I'm in art and design, and I'm a design history professor. I teach studio and design history at Rutgers. So I was aware of someone in Oakland, California, called Lisbet Tellefsen, and I don't know if Lisbet can join us now. There she is. Good evening, Lisbet.
Hello, hello, good afternoon.
Oh yeah, of course, good afternoon. So I knew there was this person called Lisbet Tellefsen because we had a family connection, basically, a Bay Area family connection, and through my wife. And I knew that you collected posters, and I was aware, and other things as well, but I was aware that you were I won't say a hoarder, but you had really impressive.
Ouch, Gerry.
Yeah,
ouch.
No, it's not a hoarder because it was organized. But you know, I saw various things that you had, and a few years ago, well, a decade ago actually, we did our first collaboration, and that was on the image of Che Guevara. You lent me around 20 images of Che, and I got a number of designers and artists to kind of respond to those images. And I was interested in the just in the mass reproduction of this icon of revolution, and how after a while it becomes kind of empty. So that was at the Mason Gross Galleries at Rutgers, and it was a much smaller enterprise, but it filled all the Mason Gross Galleries. It was really exciting, and I thought, I believe, Donna, did you see that exhibition? No, maybe it was before your time, but I thought I've got to work with Lisbet again on this because, well, one of the reasons is because I don't think design objects are given the space in art galleries that they need, that they deserve, because they're such powerful things. And I don't think that we realize that. Anyway, a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, can you remember how the ball got rolling on this? You mentioned the Davis collection to me.
Well, it was 5 years ago, because in 2016, it was the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Black Panther Party.
Mm-hmm.
And here in Oakland, there was a large 50th anniversary celebration that included an exhibit at the Oakland Museum. And it turned out to be the highest attended exhibit in the history of the museum.
Mm.
And I had a number of pieces in that show. And, you know, all of us that were participating were really humbled that there would be such tremendous response to this. And after the end of the exhibit, I realized it was also the 50th anniversary of Angela Davis coming to public prominence. That, you know, in 1969, she had her academic freedom case. The 50th anniversary of that would be 2019, all the way through her acquittal in 1972, which would be 2022. So at that point, I started to talk to all my museum connections and say, you know, I've got this pretty singular archive, and I think that Angela, there's still a tremendous amount of interest in her story.
Mm-hmm.
And you tried to drum up some interest, and you and the Oakland Museum were the two that bit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that was the beginning, and that was steadily 2016. And now it's the 55th anniversary of the Black Panther Party. We just finished all of that last month. So it has been 5 years to get this over the finish line.
But you had been collecting Davis material for much more than 5 years. You've been collecting it for how long? I mean, basically you collect activist graphics, yes? In general.
Not
Bay Area, California.
Not
Black.
really. I have a few different things that kind of connected via this archive.
Right.
I've always been a poster collector.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've had significant political poster collection since my late teens. And independent of that, I'm a community archivist. I'm the keeper of the papers for all the organizations and things that I've been involved with over my life. And they tend to run in two different tracks. And I started a project with several other political poster colleagues, and we embarked on a project to digitize our collections. Mm-hmm. And to make it sexy for me, they were like, let's start with our Angela Davis posters.
Right.
And I'll save the rest of that story for my favorite thing. But all of that to say, I did not embark on creating an Angela Davis archive that got completely out of control and has basically taken over the last decade of my life. That was a happy accident. Mm-hmm. But I'll dial it back to you to say, I come from an old school graphic design background. I ran a print shop for 25 years. I've made posters and flyers for 30 years of my life. And I think the entree to my intrigue around Angela was around the graphic design. You know, that was the hook. Mm-hmm. So I'll leave that there for now.
Yeah, I mean, so you and I had those conversations. I thought that Rutgers would be an incredibly rich and appropriate place for this exhibition to happen, because it's such a complex topic and relates to so many different areas of expertise within the university. It really is. I think, you know, university galleries, museums can lead the way because they can present these very complex, rich stories that can appeal to wide audiences. So I thought Rutgers would be great for this, and I approached Donna because Donna and I had worked on projects before, and then we started thinking about this. I don't remember, Donna, at which point we approached Tom Sokolowski, but I think we got Tom's general approval, and then the two of us went out to Oakland to visit you, Lisbet, and you can really only assess this stuff in person through looking at it. You do have this incredible digital archive of a lot of the things you have, and most of the things that are in the exhibition, and you spend a lot of time on that, and it's a huge resource. But we knew we had to actually see, I was going to say smell, but we really had to get a sense of the materiality of this stuff, the scale, how different pieces relate to each other. So we went out, when was that? 2 years ago, maybe? No, longer.
Longer. I think it was probably 2017, maybe 2018.
Right.
But it was pretty early on, I think.
Right. And then Donna and I started getting seriously going through the material and deciding what would go in, the materials that we would like to show, how we would show it. And I think the very important thing to say is that, as with the Che show that you and I had done, we didn't just want to have the archive. We wanted to have artworks that somehow spoke to the archive. And I think that's something that Donna, you really ran with. And I don't know if you wanted to say something about or do you want to come back to this when we're looking at things?
Well, maybe we can kind of come back to that when we're looking at things, but I do want to say that, Gerry came up to me and said, how would you feel about doing a show about Angela Davis? And I was like, what a great idea. How would we do that? And then he's told me about your archive. And, soon after that, we went out. And I have to say that I had my doubts thinking how we could do an exhibition from an archive, because I'm a curator who works in an art museum. But your archive was filled with so much visually stunning, incredible, large posters and all kinds of things, as I see behind you, for example, but that it really made it easy to visualize it as an exhibition. And the other thing that Gerry and I were, and Gerry probably knew more about your archive than I did, but it was my first trip to your house and to see everything. And it was astounding to me to just see the mass of material. And that was something that we always really wanted to bring to the students at Rutgers, because we wanted students at Rutgers to understand that history is told through an editing process, but we wanted to give them as much of the material to sift through on their own as possible. So, and for our audience members, Gerry and I are both situated within what we call the archive room in the center of the exhibition at the Zimmerli Art Museum. So, because we really feel that the archive is the heart of the show. I think that's fair to say, right, Gerry?
Yeah, yes. And I think, the exhibition celebrates the archive as much as it's not really, as you said, it's not really about Angela Davis in a sense. It's about the archive, and it's about the importance of activating and retaining and engaging with history and memory. One of the reasons we wanted, and you'll see this if you haven't been, if our guests haven't been to the show already, it's quite intentionally overwhelming, though structured, I think. But one of the things that we wanted to say with that is this is important. What Lisbet has done in collecting all these things is the tip of an iceberg in a sense, although is as complete as it could possibly be, I know, but it just is an indication of all this activity that went on internationally. So we wanted this feel to it. So so then there were a number of grants that the Zimmerli got to do the show. Then it was halted for a year because of COVID. We published the catalog a year ago, almost exactly. So this is the earliest catalog has ever been published, I think, before an exhibition, because usually they're published like after the opening or just before the opening. And you were saying about doubts, Donna. I've had doubts about this all the time. Before I saw the catalog, I thought, you know, these are going to be hundreds of images, as you can see behind Lisbet there, of the same person. Might it be boring or repetitive? And it wasn't until I saw the catalog that I realized, no, it's not. It's actually very deep. These reiterations are very deep. And I had the same doubts about the show. Could we get all of this material in? Would the artworks and the archive work together? So it's only when in doing it that I think this very complex and I think ambitious undertaking is kind of, to me anyway, has proved, yes, it does work.
You know, I'll throw my 2 cents in. I also had my doubts. You know, I recognize that the archive just has so much material, and in my building it, it was really about, you know, I get requests from scholars who are writing on certain things, or film and media projects. You know, everybody has their own vein that they're trying to mine. And, you know, I'm really focused on creating the most robust archive available, so that, you know, it's not my idea, or it's not my job to define the stories. Mm-hmm. You know, I basically am working to provide as broad material as I can, so that anybody else can come in and tell the stories that they wanted to tell. And when the 2 of you decided that you were going to move forward this exhibit, and I saw how many pieces, you know, almost 300 pieces that you chose. And I really had no idea how that could come together cohesively. I understood the context of it being an art museum. But it wasn't really until I landed in New Jersey and walked into those galleries to really see how you made it work. And it was way more successful than I could have imagined. It was certainly larger than I could have imagined. And the few days that I spent there, I actually spent most of my time surreptitiously following people in the gallery, seeing how they, you know, moved through the space, what they looked at, how they interacted with the material. And, you know, I would go up and talk to people, particularly, you know, young students of color, when I could catch them. I'm like, so what do you think about this? Is it too much? And to a person, they all had, you know, remarkable comments that every one of them was getting something different out of it. Mm. Some people would spend copious times going through these archival binders, reading materials, taking snapshots on their phones. You know, others were like simply marveling at, you know, the context of the era. You know, this sort of old poster exhibit, they don't make posters like that anymore. You know, it's digital, you know, it's primarily digital. You'll get some things printed out, but, you know, just the fact that there is this person who they might know their name generated this much ink in a 2 to 3 year time frame, you know, that came up multiple times. They were really thinking about, you know, she's not a politician, she's not Beyonce. you know, the idea of a political figure who was not running for office generating this type of material was interesting to them. And I'm like, oh, you know, never really thought about that, but yeah. So all of that to say, I think you guys did a phenomenal job making sense of all of this and creating an environment that's kind of compelling, because it could just as easily be mind-numbing. Oh, you're muted, Donna.
Sorry. Thank you. I think that's a perfect segue to start sharing images of the exhibition. So shall I do that? Okay. So, oops. Sorry. It's always something. So why don't I sort of allow people to sort of walk through the exhibition the way Gerry and I envisioned an individual walking through the exhibition. So this is the opening wall, and Gerry and Lisbet, if anything, we can talk about how did we come to these decisions, I guess, that we came to. I think that I want to say, first of all, that Gerry Beegan is not simply a professor of design. He's also a designer, or not so much a practicing designer, I guess, these days, but he was for the Angela Davis show. So much of the design of the exhibition is really, you know, Gerry, which I think has really, you know, pushed the envelope for the design of the exhibition. And maybe, Gerry, do you want to say anything about?
I would say that I implemented the design, but it was a discussion with you, Donna. That's what it had to be. And to take an example, we were looking for how do we open this? We knew we had to have those panels on the left, and then we had to have something on the right that would be eye-catching. And initially, one of the ideas was to use the image that's behind Lisbet. And she'll be talking about that, I think, later on. That image that's behind Lisbet. And so if you can imagine that screen there, that wall there, completely occupied by this really interesting, it's a sort of typology of Davis images, you know, facing left, facing right, all sorts of different in this order. And we looked at that, and then we thought that really isn't going to work. And we came through conversation with this idea that the first wall there had to kind of be a sampler of images, powerful images, but had to get over this idea of the importance of the word, because I think one of the themes of the exhibition is the importance of knowledge, of the printed word, of what that can do. And so if you see the exhibition, you'll see that these quotations, and they're really pretty large, many by Davis, but there's also James Baldwin, W.E.B. Du Bois, Aretha Franklin. So there are all these really, I think, deep and important quotations establishing this theme of the word and the printed word in terms of those posters. So we were setting the scene there. And then as we went through, this is from the first room, and Donna and I were doing what you called, I think, did you call it old school curating?
Yeah, I did call it, I called it old school curating, because we did a lot of moving things around in the gallery to make sure that that it would work.
I mean, we had a plan. There was a plan. I'd drawn plans, and we had everything framed and ready to go. But in the first room, we wanted to establish the themes of the exhibition, really. We also didn't want to be too didactic. We didn't want to have huge wall texts explaining each room. So that doesn't happen. And in the first room, we wanted to, first of all, start off the timeline that runs along. You can see it's running along the top of all the walls. And that's a timeline that Lisbet, it's an edited version of a timeline that Lisbet compiled that is in the catalog. The full version's in the catalog. And that timeline kind of drags us through chronologically both Davis's story and other important events, civil rights, Black Power events that are happening at that particular moment. So that's a kind of structural device, and also establishes the theme of time. Then in the middle, we would have framed artworks or posters or whatever, larger pieces. And then the shelving contains archival material that's smaller and more delicate, not really frameable. And in the first room, we established the theme of, we also established this idea of interweaving art and design. And I don't know if you want to say something about that. This is a room we really changed a lot, but it does establish that theme, I think.
Yeah, because, as I said, early on, one of the things we really wanted to do was not focus on the image of Angela Davis, even though almost everything in the archive was about the image of Angela Davis. But Angela Davis was so much more than the image that that we remember her by, the 1970s image of Angela Davis. And we wanted to really think about her importance in the time in 1969 and 1970 to 72. So the Black Panther Party, and the fact that she was a communist, and the fact that she was teaching at UCLA when she, she lost her job because she admitted to being a member of the Communist Party. And one of her earliest activism that we document in the exhibition. And I say that because, as Lisbet pointed out in her timeline, Angela Davis was inspired to be politically active when she became a Girl Scout member. So she has a long interest in social activism, but it was in 1969 when she was working on behalf of the Soledad brothers that was also part of the beginning of her interest in prison abolition, and really working to free political prisoners in the United States and across the world, really. So it was important to set that up with these beautiful large photographs by Stephen Torlens, which are these big black and white images that you see in the first room. And also because that was kind of the threat that was hanging over her throughout this period, and many activists who were being targeted by COINTELPRO and other things. So always Angela Davis is kind of at the center, but there's so much more around her. And we were really trying to bring all of those threads up into visuality, in a way, I guess we could say. And then on the other side of the wall, this blue wall, is a group of really wonderful photographs by Stephen Seamus, which I can't really show you, but if you come in to see the exhibition, you'll see that they're also a beautiful encapsulation of the whole story, from her speaking out to free Huey Newton in 1969 in Oakland, California, to being acquitted of all charges in 1972.
If I could just say, Donna, so the prison photographs, the Torlens, as you say, they're beautiful, but they're very chilling. I mean, I was with a group of students last week in the galleries, and they found them really disturbing.
Yeah.
They are beautiful in one sense, formally, but they're all photographs of the light that is thrown by prisons. And it sort of establishes the theme of incarceration that kind of hovers over the Angela Davis story, and it's something that she devoted her life to. And also the two other excellent exhibitions that you've curated into the Zimmerli at the same time. So I think it makes a sort of chilling and quite dramatic start to the show. That room.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm just going to move us along to the second room. And you know, as we said earlier, the archive was always the heart of the exhibition, and this room is really devoted to the archive. It's a reading table, and on this reading table are 5 notebooks that Lisbet put together for us. So they are, well, actually, Lisbet, why don't you talk a little bit about those notebooks that you put together?
So this whole archive grew organically as kind of a project. I'd just been trying to work through some things about telling life stories. You know, I'm a personal archivist for several people, and, you know, I'm often thinking through how do you use external artifacts as memory for reconstructing a life. And so, because there was so much material produced on Angela, I started to just kind of use her as a test case, kind of assembling different sorts of material, treating her life like a jigsaw puzzle. And to keep track of all the material I was gathering, I started to put them in binders, just chronological binders. And one of the first manifestations of this archive was essentially a 7-8 volume encyclopedia of chronological material. And so when you said you wanted to recreate some of the experience in the archive, I started to look at some of this encyclopedia and break down different pieces that fleshed out different thoughts and, you know, different colors. So there are 5 different binders. One is titled Black, Beautiful, and Red, that really talks about her backstory as a communist and coming to public prominence. So there's a lot of just little tidbits in there. And when I was on site a couple weeks ago, every time I went into that gallery, people would be absorbed in completely different things. You know, there's a photograph of her running into Muhammad Ali at LaGuardia Airport, where he's on his way to the Rumble in the Jungle, and they're exchanging digits. You know, just random. But, you know, there's just so many little different tidbits that really are just lost in history or the random minutia of somebody's life. But I just found these archival binders as a wonderful immersive way to kind of dive in, you know. So I hope that for people that still haven't had a chance to check them out, that you devote a little time to go through them, because there's just some great little nuggets. Sorry, my dog is having a moment here.
Do you want to show the next slide?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my dog is having a moment as well. I'm sorry about that. So this is from our opening, which was on October 14th. We had almost 300 people in the museum, so it was a fantastic celebration. And you can see how people have really gathered around this this table, and they're all digging into the notebooks that Lisbet has put together. So it's exactly what Gerry and I envisioned, you know, people digging in and really taking the opportunity to figure out the story for themselves. So, and I'll go to the,
just a word about the graphics there on the wall. So we wanted these large, and Donna and I discussed this at length, about the size of it. But we wanted these large words that just says archive, that is both, you know, a verb and a noun. You know, so it's the action of archiving, to archive, and it is a place. It's a place where, you know, you're gathering things. So we wanted to make this an active space, and really, as you know, as we know, the archive has this potential, but it needs to be activated. So that's what we're trying to get to there.
Yeah. You know, in looking at this picture too, one of the things that really struck me about the exhibit is on the left wall, there's the first poster that has a light blue figure of a woman with her arm raised, and then it goes down to the Black Angela figure. That poster is almost 4 feet tall. So it's amazing how the size of this gallery can really hold these, you know, that's a poster that I can only take out once in a blue moon, just because even picking it up is laborious, and to see it fit so well in the space, and it's just one of many oversized posters, really struck me. I'm like, it looks like a small a small piece, but that's 4 feet tall.
Yeah, it's nice to have big high walls. I'll say that. And I'm going to move us along. Here's another view of the same nice tall wall with the posters. And we were very carefully designed walls to relate to the timeline that was above them, so that, you know, the exhibition through the archive, the first 2 rooms, well, or 3, is really follows a chronological history from 1969 to 1972. And I do want to also say that in these shelving units, which, you know, includes a lot of magazines and posters and press photos and other documents, we kept them in their archival sleeves because we wanted it to be very clear to people that we were thinking of these as archival documents. And that was something that Gerry and I had agreed on, you know, right from the start, that we wanted to think about, you know, works of art, the posters, and the posters were of, you know, were widely different. Posters by artists like Wadsworth Jarrell and Faith Ringgold and Elizabeth Catlett, and posters by unknown people who made posters. So that's another interesting thing. And, you know, following along, we got to the trial. Another incredible resource was finding in Lisbet's archive these court sketches, these beautiful drawings of the jury, the lawyers, the prosecutors, the audience members. So really another visualization of the whole kind of history of the trial there. And then really we turn the corner, and then the rest of the show is really devoted to sort of contemporary artists and how artists have continued to find in Angela an icon, an inspiration, a way to continue to think through the issues that she made famous, from, you know, intersexual feminism to, you know, radical politics to prison abolition. So one of the things I do want to talk about is, I'm sorry, Gerry seems to have been bumped out and is trying to reconnect. So I'm hoping Janine can send him a new invitation and Gerry can join us again. But let me just speak briefly about some of the artworks that are in the show, and how important really the works of art are to the ideas that the archive really generated. And one of the really important ideas is that history is never past, history is always present. And that is something that Angela Davis says in the interview that we have on view in the exhibition as well. So I guess I should have said in 2019, we worked with the Oakland Museum of Art to put together a videotaped interview of Angela Davis in her home in Oakland. Renee de Guzman, who was the curator at Oakland, did the interview with a film crew from the Oakland Museum, and we have part of that interview, an edited version of that interview on view in the Zimmerli Art Museum. And it is a kind of wonderful way of seeing Angela Davis as a living, breathing person, you know, after having seen a whole exhibition based on an image of Angela Davis from 1972. It's really remarkable to see her speaking and really speaking so eloquently about art and politics, about history, about the importance of the young generation to be moving things forward. So I'm glad Gerry is back. Gerry, we're just now talking about some of the artwork in the exhibition. And I wanted to point out Stephanie Jemison and Justin Hicks, which is this sound installation here in the middle of the gallery, because wherever you are in the gallery, you hear Stephanie and Justin's sound installation, which is a kind of beautiful rumination on history and focuses on Nina Simone, Lorraine Hansberry, and Angela Davis, and in a sort of amazing three-part harmony of call and response. Each of those women is articulated through the lives that they lived and the work that they produced. And let me move to and then, you know, continuing along the side here, and I just want to sort of take you through to the end of the show. Oops. And which brings us to a piece by Sadie Barnett, which is this here that I'm going to talk about a little bit later when we talk about our favorites. So we're running out of time, of course. So I wonder, why don't we go to our favorites very quickly? Whoops. I guess, Gerry, you're up.
Okay. I'm up, and I chose these two, and apologies, I lost my internet connection. I chose these two. They're both done by the Angela Davis Defense Committee in London in 1971. And the reason I chose them is because they are really about the power of print. These are kind of printed images within printed images for both of them. So the one on the left is a photograph of the FBI wanted poster sort of pinned up on a kind of an official looking wall, like a wooden wall, maybe in a post office or some sort of building. It's not a domestic space. And, you know, the subtext of the design, and both of these were designed probably by the same designer. I don't know who it was, but I suspect it was one of a number of British designers, sort of left-wing designers at the time, who was a member of the committee. So, you know, it's just the wanted poster, but it completely turns the wanted poster on its head. So first of all, it says this wanted poster is a design artifact. It kind of pulls that apart, and it shows how it's trying to position Angela, you know, literally to frame her in a certain way. So the text, you know, we don't think of these as designed artifacts, but they are. So wanted by the FBI, interstate flight, murder, kidnapping, Angela Yvonne Davis. It doesn't say suspected of, or may have been involved of, or needs to go to trial for. That's what the design says. And in fact, I was, and it says this in this very official way. Everything is designed to look official. It's not just random. So everything down to J. Edgar Hoover's signature, who's the person you're supposed to get in touch with, should you come across this potentially armed and dangerous person, Angela Davis. And all of this is intentional. And that's what this poster is saying. It's saying this is what the state intends to say. And I was actually showing a group of students around a couple of weeks ago, a small group of students, and they looked at this, not at this one, but at the actual FBI poster. We have a couple of examples of that. And they said, they assumed that she had to be guilty of something, because otherwise, why was she wanted by the FBI? So this, to me, is an amazing piece of graphic design, and it subverts our FBI poster by turning it in on itself. The message is that this is what the state is trying to do to Davis, and we have to rescue her or try and rescue her from that. And you get in touch with this defense committee. You phone them or write to them and do that. Then the one on the right, by the same, I'm sure it's the same designer, it's the same typeface and the same kind of way of thinking. There's this, again, it's a book cover within a poster. And in fact, I don't know if anyone on the call, if Donna or I'm sure Lisbet has read this book. So it was a book that Davis edited and contributed to while she was in prison. And this might be a first for a young professor getting their tenure kind of clock ticking while they're in prison. But she worked on that, and it lists the other people: Angela Davis, Huey Newton, George Jackson, Bobby Seale, Erica Huggins, Fleeta Drumgo. All of the people who are in the book are listed there at the side. So although the cover is emphasizing Davis, it's saying that, you know, it's about all of these people. And it's a book that's a kind of foundational text in kind of carceral studies. The title comes from James Baldwin. He wrote a letter to Angela that was reproduced in the press. If they come in the morning for you, they will come for me in the evening. It's roughly what he says. And of course, that has resonances going back to the Second World War and to the Holocaust. The London Committee were the ones who actually suggested this book. They suggested this idea of the book. And we have this beautiful design where the book is combined with the sort of Black Power salute. And so it's saying knowledge is power. Black knowledge is power. You have to know these things. You have to know how prison operates. And so I think both of them do this wonderful thing with design, with graphics. And I think, you know, I really want to find out who designed them. They're very old at this stage, but I know at least one of the designers, I think it is still alive. So I've got to get in touch with that person. Anyway, I think I have many favorites, but those are two particular favorites.
Okay, now Lisbet, you're up. And you're muted.
Okay, I'm gonna turn off so we don't have redundant imagery. You know, I put this graphic together for a couple reasons. As I mentioned earlier, the genesis of this whole archive began as a poster project. There were three of us who collected political posters. And when we did our first round of digitizing posters and focused on Angela Davis posters, my job was to take the archival slides, and at this point, or back then, I think it was maybe 2004, 2003, I actually had to send them off to Canada to get them digitized. And when they came back, I popped these CDs into my computer and opened up probably close to 50 Angela Davis posters. And I tiled them across my screen, similar to what you're looking at now. And these days with Google Images and things like that, these kind of thumbnail galleries are everywhere. But in 2003, it was revelatory. And that I was able to look at all these images and for the first time realize that the upper left photo of her speaking in a microphone first appeared in a September 11th, 1970 issue of Life magazine. And it was a full page photograph. And as an old school graphic artist, you know, those sorts of things are gold. And as I was arranging these posters, I realized that that full page photograph was used by artists all around the world and manipulated in different kinds of ways. So you can see how one image is just the basis for, you know, a million different jumping off points. You know, in the top row, you can see, you know, it's just basically using the photographic image. In the middle row, you can see artistic license. For example, in the second row, the last two on the right, they've replaced her hand. She's no longer holding a microphone. She's got a black power fist. And then on the bottom row, her image is reversed. So I just got lost in the weeds as an old school graphic design geek. Really seeing how one image really crossed the world and inspired a generation of artists to make their contributions. And some of these come from 1970, and some of them, like the Black Power Fist on the right, that's a Shepherd Fairy that was made within the last 10 years. So these images live still, they inspire still. And yeah, I just love this graphic for that, because it also harkens back to that first moment, popping those CDs in my computer. And, you know, gosh, where are we, 18 years later? To see them on a wall in a magnificent gallery, you know. Anyway, so that was the first image that I chose. This piece, this is a 1971 Faith Ringgold, and she made 4 different posters as fundraisers for the Free Angela campaign. They each had different themes. One was America Free Angela, one was Women Free Angela. And this is one of my favorites because I had lucked out and found one of the other versions online on eBay inexpensively. And I started to do some research, and I found a piece by Faith's daughter, Michelle Wallace, where she's talking about this series as being the first feminist piece in the Black arts movement. And I started to dig a little deeper, and at some point I recognized that the piece that I had deserved better than sitting in my storage, since, you know, I didn't have a lot of exhibit opportunities. And I ended up getting that piece to the Smithsonian for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and was so stoked to see that it actually became the featured piece on their Black arts kiosk in their inaugural exhibit. And I, you know, as happy as I was for it to, you know, end up there, I also mourned the loss of, you know, giving up something that was so priceless. And almost weeks after I let it go, somehow I stumbled across this sister piece, which was even a better fit for my exhibit collection. So this piece will always have a sweet spot for me. It's still the sister companion piece, is still up at the Smithsonian as the featured piece in the Black Arts kiosk. And yeah, even in trying to figure out more about this piece, it turns out I was corresponding with Faith herself, who kept trying to get me to say how much I paid for it. And I couldn't do that. So anyway, I just, this will always be one of the special pieces.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous piece of design. It's a wonderful poster. So I'm just going to quickly talk about my two favorites that I picked. And while I'm doing that, I want to encourage people to, you know, send in your questions. I know we promised you a few minutes after we finished, and we're running a little bit late, but I think that we can all stay. But let me say, so I picked a piece by Lisbet Catlett, Six Angelas, which is a gorgeous poster. Lisbet Catlett was living in Mexico City. She was involved in the Free Angela campaign in Mexico. And she has silk screened these 6 heads of Angela Davis on a piece of mirror foil. So it's an incredibly vivid pop art kind of piece. But it's also, you know, just a wonderful indication of the support that Angela Davis had from artists all over the world. And of course, Lisbet Catlett was living in Mexico City because she herself had been associated with the Communist Party and had been harassed by the United States government and ended up moving to Mexico City, where she, you know, had a full and very successful career as an artist in Mexico. And she didn't return to the United States for many years, but she did at one point. So, and then on this piece here is by an artist named Sadie Barnett, a young contemporary artist who lives in Oakland. Her father was Rodney Barnett, and so Rodney Barnett was a Vietnam vet. He was a Black Panther, and he was also at one point a bodyguard for Angela Davis. He was harassed by the FBI's COINTELPRO program, which was an illegal surveillance campaign that targeted members of the left and the Black Panthers in particular, and also the Young Lords and the American Indian movement. Rodney Barnett, or the FBI amassed a huge file on Rodney Barnett. His family used the Freedom of Information Act to acquire those FBI papers, and Sadie uses those papers as sort of documents in her own art practice. So this is a gorgeous 30 by 40 inch drawing that reproduces one of these papers documenting surveillance of Rodney Barnett. She includes flowers and other sort of personal additions that help her to kind of deconstruct the political and official aspect of the papers. And she also commissioned or designed this wallpaper, this big vinyl wallpaper that includes a family photograph of her young cousin sitting in a chair that was made famous by Huey Newton, sitting in this chair as a symbol sort of Black Panthers. And she combines all of those things together. So it is the last piece as you sort of leave the exhibition. And one of the things that I really love about having this piece at the end of the exhibition is it brings you immediately back. If you turn the corner and go back into the exhibition, you're right back in 1969 in the Black Panthers. And to me, it's a very sort of poetic visualization of the idea that, you know, history is never gone, history is always present. And that's one of the things that I really do love about Sadie's piece. So let me stop sharing and return us, and then we can answer any questions that anybody has.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Janine here, Development and Membership Manager at the museum. Once again, I'd like to thank Donna, Gerry, and Lisbet for giving us such an inside peek about, you know, what it took to put together such a momentous exhibition. So thank you all again so much. I'd like to encourage anybody to go ahead and use that Q&A function right at the bottom of your screen to send in any questions. And in the meantime, I will be selfish and ask my own question. Lisbet, I know you mentioned eBay, and I'm so curious as to what your primary, you know, source was to amass such an incredible archive as you were doing it, you know, after the events had actually happened. Oh, Lisbet, you're muted.
Hi. So, you know, I started to use as a political poster collector. You know, I think I started using eBay maybe in 1999. I was focused on Cuban posters, and at that point it was a really vibrant marketplace connecting people from, you know, all around the world who loved Cuban poster design. And as the Angela Davis poster started to pop off, I ended up putting, you know, making color Xeroxes of the posters and putting them in a binder. And I wanted more content. So I would go not only to online archives as newspapers started to digitize, I would also, you know, see on eBay if there was anything interesting. And every once in a while, you know, spectacular things would come up. For example, newspapers, print media began its decline, and a lot of major newspapers started to liquidate their photo morgues. And they were using eBay to liquidate their old photographs. And at the time, nobody was really paying attention. So, you know, I couldn't not purchase the Angela Davis and Black Panther photographs, and there were hundreds of them.
Wow.
So in a kind of way, eBay really precipitated this, because, you know, I'm seeing all this history of a life just floating around, and, you know, at some point it really became clear that it deserved to be kept together, and I was probably the person to do it. So, you know, I still go on eBay, though it's a completely different marketplace. You know, I've gotten a lot of material from Angela herself. You know, she used to take me to her storage unit, and, you know, she's not very nostalgic, and I'd be like, well, if you don't want it, you know, hey. But yeah, I would say I probably still on eBay, though, you know, the great pieces are, you know, once in a blue moon, but I still have those moments.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That was so interesting. So we do have a question. Nina was asking, were there student participation or involvement in the exhibition planning or the interpretation of the exhibition? There's so many vibrant teaching moments, and how you organized this. I wonder if there was a seminar or other class organized in conjunction with this project. So Donna or Gerry?
Well, one thing we didn't mention was that there was involvement in the planning. There was fairly heavy involvement, mainly from faculty, but students were involved as well. So we had a steering committee, and it was certainly not Donna and I. We aren't experts, or at least I'm not an expert in a lot of this. So I don't know if you want to speak to that, Donna. You should have said that before. Or...
Yeah, we should have said that before. So we did, we had an advisory committee that included Nicole Fleetwood, Dayan Huff, Stephanie Jemison, Lisbet, Tellefsen, Erica Huggins. Those were the people that we talked to frequently and met, and they helped us with, thinking about the exhibition, organizing the programs that went along with the exhibition. But I want to say that we did have student participation, and in fact, there were a couple of graduate students that helped us by writing labels and by doing research. And in particular, that was Tracy Johnson, who recently got her PhD in the history department at Rutgers. Hannah Shaw, who was a graduate assistant who's worked at the Zimmerli Art Museum. Austin Lasada was another student who worked on the show, and he graduated from Rutgers and is now pursuing a graduate degree in art history. And but we also worked directly with Atif Akin, who teaches at Mason Gross, and his design class used the Angela Davis as the project for their own design semester. And they actually designed the big banner that's outside the front of the building on the corner of George and Hamilton Street. They came up with the sort of color palette for the show. They designed a handout timeline that was recently delivered to the Zimmerli, and they also designed some microsite that we're connecting to. I think we're still doing a little bit of work on that. So we were really happy to have students involved in that as much as possible. But we did not actually have a seminar involved in this. We did hope, and we still hope, that that probably next semester, when there'll be a class that uses the exhibition as the subject for a seminar. It's certainly being used by a lot of classes who are coming through to see the exhibition. Yes, Gerry, I think.
I think isn't Douglas got its sort of women and power? Is that what it's called? There is a I believe it's a required course that all Douglas students do, and that is featuring Angela Davis as part of that course. So it's definitely something we feel that is a resource for the university and for students. We've had really good student attendance, but getting classes in there, I think, is important. Yeah.
I also just want to throw out that there was a wonderful postdoc at Rutgers. She worked in the Scarlet and Black project. Her name is Alexandria Russell. I met her because we were both fellows at the Institute for Research on Women, and Alexandria is now at Radcliffe, where she has a fellowship. But she created a high school teaching guide for the Angela Davis show, and that is something that we are widely distributing to high schools throughout New Jersey. And we hope that there will be many high schoolers visiting the exhibition. So,
excellent. It's always great to tap into all the wonderful talent we have here at Rutgers, for sure.
Yeah.
So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for sticking with us, and hopefully you enjoyed this inside look about how this momentous exhibition came to be. So I want to formally again thank Donna, Gerry, and Lisbet for your time. And I would just like to do a plug, of course, for our next virtual member event, which is hasn't really been announced yet, but just kind of hot off the press. So December 9th at 11 a.m., save the date. Julia Tulowski, our Russian curator, will be presenting Between East and West, exploring the Ryabov collection of Russian art. So we're excited to have her talk more about the traditional Russian art, which we know we haven't had a program on in quite some time. So we're looking forward to that as well. And thank all of you for attending again and for being members and supporters. We couldn't do any of this without all of you. So once again, thank you all so much. And I hope you all have a pleasant evening and night. Take care, everyone. Thank you again.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.